What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Blazers Uprise Live here on a Tuesday. We got Tuesday, Friday episodes this week for picks against the spread. We're also going to talk about if the Blazers should hire Michael Malone, because he got fired today. Not only did Taylor Jenkins get fired by the Memphis Grizzlies in a couple weeks before the playoffs, Michael Malone did as well for the Nuggets, which is wild. There's some good coaches on the market for the Blazers this offseason. We're going to talk about that. But first, we got to rush right into picks against the spread. We're going to take a look at the standings after. We got a couple games to pick right away. Sorry, stream's going live a little bit late. We missed 4 games, but we still got 6 on the docket. Might even do picks on a Thursday or tomorrow if time permits, because it's the final week of the season. It's the final week to get picks in. We missed last Thursday. We missed 4 games today. So, want to give people a chance to catch chat, because we don't want chat to win, right? We do not want chat to win. Let me pop the chat on my beautiful vertical monitor that I have now. I've always wanted to have stream chat on a vertical monitor. And we're here. All right. So shout out to Trevin for posting the picks. Let me just plug these in here real quick, and then we'll pick... we've actually already picked this game, so let's just go to game number 2 first, and then we will go back to game number 1, plug those picks in, because this game is tipping off like right now. So... all right, game number 2 is, we got the Nets, we got the Pelicans, and we got the Nets as 1.5 point home favorites, the battle of 2 tanking teams, out for the, sorry, I'm updating the spread here, out for the Pelicans, Zion Williamson, DeJounte Murray, Trey Murphy, CJ McCollum, Herb Jones, Jordan Hawkins, and Brandon Boston. And then out for the Nets, Cam Thomas, Day'Ron Sharpe, D'Angelo Russell, DeAnthony Melton, Cam Johnson, Noah Clowney, and Keon Johnson. I'm going to take the Nets here. And next year, I'll try and figure out something a little better so we can do picks a little bit more consistently. I don't know if it's somebody else hosting or what we're doing graphic-wise, maybe a little bit less. But we will figure something out a little bit more consistent. All right, we got Nets for Eric, Arrow, Trevin, Zach, Jackson, Brendan, and Javon. And if you're new to the show, we pick games at the start, and then we talk about the topic at hand, and we got a really good topic today. All right, let me plug in. Steven went Nets, and 503 went Pelicans. All right, we got Connor and Crushables, also Pelicans. And we got chat rolling with the Brooklyn Nets, a whopping 88% of the vote for chat. All right, making this a 10v3 in favor of the Nets. All right, back to game number 1. Here's the picks that we had already for game number 1. I went Celtics. That's a Jazz logo. They are kind of the opposite of the Celtics. They suck. There we go. And let me change the Hornets logo to a Knicks logo. This is a nationally televised game. This is a much better game than Hornets and Jazz. All right. I went Celtics. Eric went Knicks. So did Arrow. So did Connor, Zach, Crushables, and Javon. We got Brendan, Jackson, Trevin going Celtics. We had chat go Celtics. It was a close chat poll. We had Boston for 503, and we had Boston for Stephen Vaughn. And we had Knicks for Crushables, making this a split vote, a 7v6 in favor of the Boston Celtics. All right, game number 3. We're going to have to plug in the graphics as we go. Game number 3 is between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves are 5.5-point road favorites. I'm going to put the injuries on my second monitor. This is how it's done, man. This is how it's done. This is beautiful. All right. So we got... Sorry, just 1 second. We got no injury report for this game. Oh no, Wolves Bucks. Okay, I was searching Timberwolves. All right. So for the Wolves, only one player on their injury report. Terrence Shannon Jr. is questionable. And then for the Bucks, they'll be without Jericho Sims, Damian Lillard, and Pat Connaughton. Hopefully Dame can return for the playoffs, man. It'll be a shame if we never get Giannis and Dame together in the playoffs. All right, chat, there is your poll. I'm going to go Minnesota. They're playing better basketball right now. Got Minnesota for Crushables and Javon. We got Bucks for Eric, Arrow, Connor, Trev, and Zach. Jackson and Brendan. We had Steven go Bucks. We had 503 go Bucks as well. And we got chat going Timberwolves, 67% of the vote, making this a 9v4 in favor of the Milwaukee Bucks. All right. Next game on the docket, game number 4 of 6. We have the Oklahoma City Thunder hosting the Los Angeles Lakers. The Thunder, 9.5-point home favorites. The Lakers just blew them out recently. The spread has changed a lot. It was initially a 15-point spread. It's down to 9.5. Out for the Lakers, Maxi Kleber and Rui Hachimura. Out for the Thunder, Nikola Topic, AJ Mitchell, Alex Dukas, Ousmane Dieng, and Jalen Williams, the big man, the non-All-Star Jalen Williams. Chat, there is your poll. I'm going to go OKC. I think they get their revenge today. We have Lakers for Eric, Arrow, Connor, Trevin. OKC for Zach, Jackson, Brendan, Javon. And Lakers for Crushables. 503 went Lakers. Stephen Vaughn went with the Thunder. And chat is going with the Lakers, 80% of the vote. Making this a split vote, a 7v6 in favor of the Los Angeles Lakers. Game number 5. We have the Phoenix Suns hosting the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors 9.5-point road favorites. Injuries for this game. Out for the Warriors, GP 2 weeks. And questionable is Quentin Post. And then out for the Suns, Kevin Durant. Are the Suns eliminated from play-in contention if they lose today? I love how Trevin put Phoenix Suns with nobody just to illustrate that literally everybody is going with the Golden State Warriors. This might be a clean sweep. You know what? I'll take an island. My season is basically done. We didn't look at the standings before this. My season is basically done. I'll take a freaking island, all right? I'm not scared anymore because I have nothing to play for at this point. Other than my island record, I guess. All right? We literally got Warriors for everybody else. And I will die at the sword of the Phoenix Suns. I'm just waiting for chat to pour in a bunch of Suns votes so they can die with me. And take away my island. They're not going to do it, though. End poll. We got an island for me. At least it's sunny on this island. That's a really bad joke. I'll move on. All right. The final game of the day. It's the Los Angeles Clippers. And they're hosting the San Antonio Spurs. The Clippers are 13.5 point home favorites. Injuries for this game out for the Spurs. Riley Minix, De'Aaron Fox, Victor Wembanyama, and Jeremy Sohan. Out for the Clippers, Amir Coffey and Seth Lundy. And questionable is Kawhi Leonard. Fake island? There is no such thing as a fake island. It doesn't even make sense. Alright, chat, there's your poll. Eric has so much pride over islands, man. He's policing my island, calling it a fake island. No island on this one. We have the Clippers for Eric, Trevin, Zach. Eric's just jealous that I have an island. Jackson and Brendan also going Clippers. We got Spurs for Arrow, Connor, Crushables, Javon. All right, we got 503 going Clippers. We got Steven going Clippers. We got chat going Clippers, 100% of the vote. I'll also go Clippers. I don't trust the freaking Spurs, man. 9v4 in favor of the Spurs. Time for double downs. All right, chat's double down is the Clippers, just based on the last poll. And it's the Clippers once again. It was Clippers last time. My double down is the Phoenix Suns, my island. Eric is doubling down on something that is not an island, so it's not as cool. He went with a different orange team, though. We got Crushables going Minnesota. Javon going Brooklyn Nets. Golden State for Trevin, Brendan, and Arrow. They want to lose an island battle to me. Will you die on the Phoenix Suns island? We'll see. We'll see how my survival skills are. Don't know I'm confident I can survive here. We got Lakers for Connor. Whoops. All right, Connor going with his Los Angeles Lakers. Jackson went with his Los Angeles Clippers. Zach is going OKC. And then the final two double downs, we got Nets for Steven. And for 503, we have the this is one of the first 4 games. I'll randomize his, I don't even care. All right, he's doubling down on the Boston Celtics. That's what the random number generator told me. All right. Zach's double down. OKC. There we go. All right. That concludes picks against the spread. We got wildly different double downs here. We got 3 people on the Warriors. That's Brendan, Trevin, Arrow, Jackson, and Chat are together on the Clippers. And then everybody, you got Steven and Javon on the Nets. Everybody else fending for themselves. Let me take a screenshot of the standings. And we'll take a quick look at the standings. Alrighty. Let me update this. Look at this, man. We're just using spreadsheet images at this point. This is what happens when your boy doesn't have time to make the standings. But you got Chat 4.5 games up on Javon. We have Trevin 5.5 games back. Trevin can catch Chat. So can Crushables, man. Chat went 4-5. I went 1-8. That's why I am doubling down on the Phoenix Suns. I'm just embracing it at this point. We got 503 going 1-8 as well. We had Trevin go 7-2 to give himself a chance of catching Chat. Crushables, Zach, Arrow, all 6-3. We're 51-66 on the day. It looks like it's going to be impossible to get to 500 unless we have a great final day of the season because it has 15 games. I believe there's 15 games on Friday as well, so we still got 30 games left for each of us to pick, which could make a huge difference. But it's really just Chat with Javon, Trevin, and Crushables trying to catch them. And oh, look who showed up right after picks against the spread. Oh, wait, let me put you on the screen. If I there we go. There's that. And all right. Well, so first question, why was my island fake?
Because you only have an island because you changed your pick to an island.
Did I ever put the Warriors logo up?
It looked like you did. I thought you did.
I don't know. Somebody review the tape. But also, I can willingly choose an island.
No, I know. I'm just saying it's not
still
necessarily an island if you voted to the islands like when you pick.
I'm down here in 10th. Just let me have something. Let me have something, man. I went 1-8. I'm down horrendously right now, and this is like what I'm clinging on to is like, man, what if the Suns give me an island win? You know, I got to make up ground somehow. You know, I'm down here and I'm desperate, and it's not good. And what good desperation would be, maybe, in my opinion, would be if the Blazers this offseason were desperate for Michael Malone. We're going to have that conversation. That would be good desperation. At least desperate for a different coach, at least. All right? Let's just start there. This is going to be a fun conversation. So you got a couple good coaches, in my opinion, on the market for the Blazers if they want to go with somebody with experience, if they don't want to go the new head coach route again like they did with Chauncey Billups. It's rare that there are good retreads on the market or guys that have recently been fired. You look at like Doc Rivers, some of his problems in Milwaukee, he's overrated. You look at Budenholzer, has a terrible year in Phoenix, even though he's won a ring before, right? And we've always been against going the retread route. But if they want to go the retread route, Taylor Jenkins and Michael Malone are about as good of candidates as you could possibly have envisioned for the Blazers this offseason. Very shocking firing today. The Denver Nuggets letting go Michael Malone and Calvin Booth, their GM, with only a week before the end of the regular season. You had two Western Conference, at least play-in teams, probably playoff teams, fire their head coach in the final month of the regular season. Of course, the Grizzlies did a little bit ago with Taylor Jenkins, and then the Nuggets with Michael Malone. Man, I was shocked by that firing today. So I guess if you want to give your thoughts on the Malone firing, Eric, I guess I'll get those first, and then we can talk about maybe which one of those coaches would be a better option for the Portland Trail Blazers this offseason.
Yeah, the NBA season is drunk. Between the Luka trade and Jenkins getting fired. I mean, you can even throw Mike Brown getting fired earlier in the season into that. And now, I mean, what are these teams doing right before the playoffs? And then the owner saying like, "Oh, we're hoping to get a playoff jolt by doing this." What? In what world will you get a playoff jolt by firing your coach like right before? I mean, that's crazy.
The timing is strange, man.
Yeah.
You know what this made me think of too? There's some Blazer fans that think Terry Stotts should be in like his 14th season as the head coach of this team.
Right.
But yet you see the Grizzlies and the Nuggets in the final couple of weeks before they make the playoffs, firing their head coach, Michael Malone, somebody who won a ring with them, and it's not his fault he has like no defensive pieces left. Doesn't have KCP or Bruce Brown left, right? So if anything, the roster's just gotten worse. I was shocked by that. I mean, but that's coaches, man. Coaches are not hired to last forever. They're hired to inevitably get fired one day, and it's just shocking in terms of the timing of this. I've never seen a playoff team fire a head coach at this time of year, let alone two in the same conference. Right,
and I guess that makes. I thought I saw 4 out of the last 6 NBA champion coaches have been fired now. And
yeah,
that's crazy, man. Because like Vogel, LA, Budenholzer in Milwaukee, Malone here. I'm missing one, but who am I missing? Kerr's.
Vogel.
I said Vogel. Kerr didn't get fired. I don't know. Chat can help us out. Who are we missing?
Nick Nurse.
Nick Nurse. Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't get not waiting until the end of the season. And also, I mean, the whole, I guess there was a rift between the two of them, Booth and Malone, regarding getting rid of KCP in the offseason or letting him go. Booth actually made some comments that like they'd be fine and better off maybe without him. So like why
without who? Sorry, I blanked.
Contavious Caldwell-Pope when he left this offseason. And they probably couldn't afford to pay him that contract, so it's probably a moot point. But I mean,
there was also the rumor of Booth wanted Malone to play Jalen Pickett over Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, then why did you sign it? Like those are both Booth's fault. Like that's not those aren't Malone's decisions. So I don't understand why Malone would get fired. Why not just fire Booth then? But it is crazy that they won a championship a couple years ago. Are right in the mix for a top seed right now, home court advantage and all that. And it still wasn't good enough for their front office or whatever. Makes you wonder why, a championship GM and coach can get fired, yet a huge portion of our fan base is completely content re-signing and extending a GM that has done nothing.
Yeah, I guess we should also have that conversation real quick. But yeah, I mean, there are Blazer fans that, dude, Joe Cronin can do no wrong, and Terry Stotts should be head coach for life. And then you see all these other organizations, and like they hold their personnel to a higher standard where they'll fire them if they're not meeting that standard or if things aren't the way they want it, right? But it just feels like the Blazers, it's like the bar is just very low. Like, why is Chauncey still here? I mean, if Chauncey's brought back next year, man, just because he won 35 games or whatever this year with a roster that was better than last year, I mean, that's just a perfect example of how the Blazers don't have an ownership group that seriously wants to win and won't hold the people under them accountable, right? It's like, this should not be a situation where Chauncey Billups is like the head coach of the Portland Trailblazers for a decade, much longer than 4 of the past 6 championship head coaches didn't even have a tenure that long, right? At some point, you got to move on from him. He's already been here probably a little bit too long, but at least you didn't pay him to not coach. You didn't fire him early. So Cronin gets his extension, right, because he made a couple of nice moves. And we'll see what happens with Chauncey. Maybe we'll save the Cronin stuff for last since we're on the topic of the coach. Eric, who would you rather have as Blazers head coach next season, Michael Malone or Taylor Jenkins?
Well, before I answer that, I think I'd still be surprised if the Blazers paid what it took to get a high-level coach. And I don't know if Taylor Jenkins will fall into that or not. I'm assuming he'll get a lot of interest this offseason, so he probably will. But Michael Malone definitely will fall into that. I think his contract alone is going to rule him out of being a Portland Trailblazer head coach. So that being said, if I could pick one or the other, I would pick Jenkins because I feel like Jenkins is more I feel like he would gel more with a team trying to make that step into the playoffs versus Michael Malone. I feel like at this point of his career would get frustrated with that and not having a championship level roster, not having a Jokic level player on your roster. I feel like he would kind of like not do well as he could if he went to a better team. So I would say that Malone's definitely the more experienced and better coach, but I think for the Blazers roster, I'd pick Jenkins.
I don't agree with the assessment of like Michael Malone would be really frustrated or whatever. I think a similar example could be Ime Udoka was Celtics head coach, gets fired, has a scandal, right? Malone didn't have a scandal like that, but goes to the Rockets and they're bad and he turns them into a really good team. You know what I mean? I think if you're coming to Portland, you know what you're getting yourself into. I don't think Malone would struggle necessarily with getting like so frustrated he made coaching mistakes or was too hard on guys. I think when I look at who I would want next in a head coach, I think Michael Malone fits it much better than Taylor Jenkins because I think the number one priority for a head coach for the Blazers next season is bringing in somebody who's more creative offensively. And yeah, the Nuggets have Jokic. It's really easy to be creative with him, right? But when he's out of the game, they still run some good stuff and have some good half-court offense and so do some creative things. I think Malone is better in that regard than Taylor Jenkins. There's been a lot of kind of critique of Jenkins putting John Morant in the corner and just sticking him in the corner at times, which is confusing, right? Like, and I just imagine, man, would that happen with Scoot, right? Would he stick Scoot in the corner?
Well, Scoot's a light-out shooter, so.
Yeah, I guess we're just going to turn him into Kyle Korver. But in all seriousness, I think, like, Malone, he's hard on his players, but I think the players that the Blazers have, the young court that they have, can handle that. I think somebody like Donovan Clingan can certainly handle that. He had Danny Hurley is his head coach, I think somebody like Denny would respect that. I think somebody like Tamani could handle that. And that's the thing is, like, those guys get after it defensively. It just comes down to, can they execute better offensively, right? And that falls on the coach. You need somebody that can be more creative in terms of scheming up some half-court offense. I think Michael Malone's a better fit for that. So I would rather have him this offseason than Taylor Jenkins.
Yeah, the thing I worry about is we've seen this with a lot of coaches, Stotts included. Like, once they have a system that kind of works, they don't really ever adapt or change after that. And I'm not saying Michael Malone is that way, but I could see him coming in and just trying to run something that he ran in Denver and not having quite the same personnel and it just not working as well. So I don't know. I feel like, I don't think it's like necessarily like he's too hard on players or something like that, why it wouldn't work. I just think he's kind of sees himself as above this kind of job right now. He's probably going to go after a job that is a little closer to what he's looking for.
Yeah, but I mean, here's how you have to pitch it. It's this team won 35 games. We think you're a better, 36 games maybe if they beat the Jazz. We think you're a better coach than the last guy. This young roster is getting better, right? And you can come in and take this team to a whole nother level, right? And pitch them on that with like a long runway forward. I think that's a decent pitch. It's a better pitch than last year. I think this is a better time to try and hire a good coach than last year. The problem is San Antonio, if they're replacing Popovich, that job is probably just going to be much more attractive because you got Victor Wembanyama and they have even more draft capital moving forward than the Blazers to add a guy. Like if, let's just say like a Giannis becomes available in the future, that could be a team that could go after Giannis. I mean, imagine Giannis and Wemby together. But yeah, so that job is attractive. I don't think the Grizzlies' job is necessarily more attractive than Portland's. Yes, they're a better team, but you got this John Morant headache. The way they fired their coach was very random. And they have struggled lately. They're like a play-in team. I think you can make the case that Portland could be close to or even in the same tier as Memphis next year if Memphis struggles a little bit more and Portland has a really good year, which if you have a good coach, maybe that's possible, right? So with the headache that is John, he potentially wants out and this and that. I don't know if Memphis is necessarily that much more attractive than Portland as a job. I think obviously it just comes down to pay. But, Taylor Jenkins is obviously not going back to Memphis. If Malone goes to San Antonio, I think there's a good chance that if the Blazers go with somebody with experience, Taylor Jenkins ends up being a fit for them. And I still would like that hire, but I like Malone more. I think it's a problem with coaches getting stuck in their ways when they don't run creative stuff or they don't have much motion because oftentimes it's just, we're playing through Damian Lillard, right? And then if we don't have Damian Lillard, we're isolating with Anthony Simons a ton or we're isolating a bunch with guys that we should not be running a ISO-heavy offense through. That's the biggest problem with some of those types of guys. I think Malone has more creative half-court stuff where it's not necessarily, like Jokic is making a ton of decisions and initiating a lot at the top. But I think with creative coaches, I worry about that a little bit less because they're willing to scheme up different things and get creative with the stuff they run. So I would count on somebody like Malone coming in and maybe switching things up and getting creative with new ways to make a different type of teamwork.
He'd sure love DeAndre Ayton, right?
You would hate DeAndre Ayton. But, I mean, here's the thing is, like, one of Klingen's strengths long-term is supposed to be passing, right? Mm. So, have him in some of these actions as a playmaker and see if you can develop that. I don't think that's a terrible idea. Not all the time, but, like, as a wrinkle to the offense, right? Where you have these athletes playing off the ball, coming off curls, getting downhill, moving. I think Malone would bring that element to the Blazers offense in the half court, which has been sorely missing under Chauncey.
Yeah. Does it worry you all that a few days ago Malone was quoted as saying that he can't get the players to watch film anymore, and they basically lost the locker room or whatever?
What was the exact quote?
Uh, he said they don't like watching film, and he can't get them to do it, or so. I think that was the quote.
So I hadn't heard that quote. I mean, that is definitely a worrying quote. I mean, they're professionals paid a lot of money. I know they're NBA players, but that's part of the job. So if you can't get them to watch film, I think that's a little crazy.
Yeah, I'm surprised that
But Chris S says maybe they're tired of his voice can be a thing with a long-standing coach. That is very, very possible.
But yeah, but that's also what I'm kind of saying. Sometimes the coach himself doesn't change his voice either.
Yeah.
And then, so I like, not that the game has changed or passed him by. This is why I've been in favor of like a really good assistant being hired, is because I feel like that particular genre of coach would come in here and work like tirelessly, whereas I feel like someone like Michael Malone, now I'm not saying this for sure, I'm just saying in general, a coach that is established might come in here and just think he has to come in and be the coach and not really have to watch hours of film and do all these different studies and stuff like that, because he already thinks he knows what he's doing, which he probably does. But yeah, do you think there's any chance the Blazers would pay for either of these guys?
I don't know. I think it could be good optically for them, but I mean, it's like, why did you just re-sign the guy that paid Jeremy Grant so much money when you could just have a lighter payroll and use that money on a coach and have a better benefit? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the quote from Malone, I'm just going to read off the exact quote. He was asked how the players took a message that he sent in, I think, a post-game press conference, and he said, "I don't really care. It's not my job to evaluate how they take things. My job is to be honest and sometimes brutally honest, and tonight it was a brutally honest message. And the guys that are full of shit, they'll say, or the guys that are full of shit won't hear it. They'll say, coach is tripping, and the guys that maybe do really care will say, because they're not going to go back and watch their minutes, because nobody watches their minutes, nobody watches film, so we'll have to show them the film. And if somebody disagrees with me, please speak up, and nobody said a word." I don't really understand what he's saying. It's not as direct as like players don't watch film, but I don't really understand what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
Because before that he was talking about the Blazers, actually. He said the Blazers kicked our butts on the offensive glass, he said, and then he rattled off some stats. Denver gave up 51 combined second chance points and points off turnovers, and it allowed 18 blow-bys. And Malone had this quote about the Blazers, all right? You ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
All they ran tonight was pick and roll. Let me get the matchup that I want. I'm going to go one-on-one, and they beat us every time. And the few times they did miss, they got every offensive rebound. So I don't know what our guys are thinking with 11 to go, and I challenge them to look at the standings, look at our remaining schedule, and if we continue to play the way we're playing, we will be in the play-in tournament. Very simple. That's just the way it is. Malone said the players need to approach every game with the proper mindset and have some pride. I don't think we played with any pride tonight. It's just funny that he's talking about the Blazers and he said all they ran is pick and roll in the context of this conversation, you know.
They didn't have Jokic, but we kicked their butt that game.
Yeah. I don't even – when was this game?
It was Friday night.
the 128-109 win. Yeah. Yep. Wow, we caused the downfall so that we could hire him, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it works. Yeah, I mean, those quotes are interesting. I don't think I like that he's honest. He's kind of reminds me of more of a college coach in terms of some of the stuff he says, which I think has worked enough for him that you can view it as maybe a positive thing. But that's the problem with that type of style is on most teams, inevitably it'll wear itself out. So it's not going to be like a 15, 20-year thing. Although Popovich is kind of the same way, and he's been the head coach in San Antonio for who knows how long, so maybe it can. But that's just kind of the outlier there. So I think on a new team, he could be a good coach, and he's shown that he can, win a championship. And I like some of the half-court offense he runs. That's the biggest thing, is get somebody who will run some creative stuff offensively. I think next year, this team should have the goal of being above average on both sides of the floor. Okay, they basically are already there defensively. Offensively, they're ranked 23rd, so they're going to need to take a step. Now, if they don't make a swing and improve the offensive personnel, I think if they're coached really, really well, they can get to about 14th, 15th offensively. Okay, if you want to be a serious team that's in the playoffs, if you can get to like 12th defensively and 15th offensively, you're probably at least in the 7-8 play-in, even in the West. The 15th ranked, the Dallas Mavericks are 14th offensively and 18th defensively. So I guess that's kind of like similar rankings there, and they're 38 and 41. So you'd like to do a little better than that, right? You want to be close to the top 10 on one side of the floor, average on offense. Maybe you can get up to like 10th defensively if you're the Blazers, if you take another step there. I think that is kind of the goal. I think a guy like Malone might be able to help them get there. But in order to be an average offense, I think without more offensive firepower, they're going to have to run more creative stuff.
I would love to hear an honest assessment if someone like Michael Malone or Taylor Jenkins thinks this would be a good opportunity for them, or if they think that maybe if they looked at it a little closer, we got lucky a lot, or like if we are maybe we're not quite as ahead of the curve as people think we are in terms of the rebuild. And if you don't make the playoffs next year, which everyone's expecting them to take that little jump, or at least the play-in, then you're probably thought of as not doing a good job next year. So would someone like Michael Malone want that on his coaching resume, to where if the Blazers just slightly underperform, you're going to look like a terrible coach, and you're going to get compared to like Chauncey Billups and stuff like that. Like, so I don't know how many coaches are going to be willing to risk that, or how many coaches really believe in this roster to the point.
Yeah, but at the same time, I get that. At the same time, the Blazers kept Chauncey around for how long, and it seems obvious that like this ownership group is willing to give a pretty long runway. So like, year one, if it looks like that, if you have job security, like, does it really matter that much to these guys?
Mm-hmm. But if you don't believe in the roster and are worried about a downtick next year, that might also signify that you don't know.
Yeah,
like conversations we've had where, how do you get to that next step,
Yeah.
And Cronin's your GM, so do you trust Cronin either?
Yeah, I mean, then again, those comments were about us, and he said, they were running his pick and roll, right? So, I don't know. I think you got defensive pieces to be a top 10 defense, and you have some offensive talent and some young guys with a lot of potential, and I think a coach could look at it as a prime situation to, like, come in and really make an impact and put a good mark on a resume. But maybe it's not Michael Malone. Maybe it's a Taylor Jenkins. And at the end of the day, if it's the only head coaching job available, then what, right? It's just like if the Suns fire Budenholzer, is that job more attractive to a Taylor Jenkins if Malone goes to San Antonio to take over for Pop, right? Basically, it's the carousel. It's the coaching carousel. So where do the Blazers end up? How do they rank against these other teams that might need a coach in terms of job preference if multiple teams are going after the same coach?
I've actually heard Bill Self's name come up with the Spurs job. If Popovich ever left.
That would be interesting, man. That would be really interesting.
I can't see.
Let's go get the Florida coach.
Yeah.
Let's go. You know, he can.
It's a little quirky, but.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like, quirky is fine.
Yeah.
Quirky's not bad.
I know.
He's young. He's 39, right? So, but just as long as they bring in a new coach and just as long as that person runs some creative offense, like, I don't really care about the rest. That's all I care about. I want to see more creative offense than we've seen for quite a while. So, the Blazers right now rank 15th defensively and 23rd offensively. So, if you look at, like, Golden State, they rank 15th offensively this year, 7th defensively on the season.
They've been awesome defensively since I got Butler.
Yeah, but just, like, in terms of, like, overall ranks, like, on both sides of the floor, 15th offensively in adjusted offensive rating, 7th defensively in adjusted defensive rating. They're 46 and 32, right? Like, if the Blazers are going to take a step, it's going to be like that, where they become a bottom top 10 defense. Like, not bottom, like, you know, bottom of the top 10, like 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th range, somewhere in there, like Golden State is. And then average offensively, like Golden State has been for this season. That gets you a 46 and 32 record, then you're in that conversation where you're battling against those other teams. I think that's really the only realistic way to do it. The Blazers are not going to be a top 10 offense next year, but they could be a top 10 defense, especially with their defense the past 2.5 months. So it's bringing in a coach that will continue to get these guys to compete and run some more creative stuff offensively that I think is the recipe for the next hire.
Especially after we add Rasheer Fleming to the mix.
Yeah, Rasheer Fleming and Colin Knipple. And Sandro Mamukelashvili.
So
there's your next Jokic. There's your mini Jokic for Michael Malone. Sandro, baby.
You know how people have been making the case as to why Cronin deserved the extension.
Yeah. Let's have this conversation for like 5 to 8 minutes, then I got to run.
Can't you make that same, like, all the same points basically for Chauncey, though? Like, I'm worried that this is signifying that they're just going to run it back next year.
I don't think it necessarily signifies anything. I think Chauncey was the last guy left over for Molshay. Everybody on the roster, Cronin has given that contract to or brought them in. I think it could be as simple as, like, they didn't agree to an extension and move on. It's not like you have to fire them. I think at the end of the day, there's 3 very important factors this offseason, okay? One is finding a new head coach. One is clearing the roster up a little bit in terms of trading a vet or two. And then one is not being too aggressive too soon, okay? Now, if the Blazers do absolutely nothing, yeah, they pass number 3. But if they bring back Chauncey and then still have all these vets on the roster, that is so freaking bad and blasphemous that it shows you that they re-signed Joe Cronin without a plan in place just because they were happy with the status quo, even though the status quo has some issues. And either that shows, they just don't care about those issues, or they don't have the awareness to even recognize how this stuff is a problem, or it's Cronin painted himself into a corner with these vets, but then somehow still got an extension. Right? So there's a monumental offseason. Let's have this Cronin conversation real quick, and we'll talk about it more on the postgame show tomorrow. I do not like the timing of this extension because I thought this offseason was going to be a perfect litmus test for his ability to put the team on a path that has a chance at contendership at some point. Not even like is likely to become a contender, just has a chance, right? And I thought this was a perfect litmus test for his ability to sell. I've talked about his issues in selling recently on a post-game show, right? And you can't have an inactive offseason in terms of selling players again, right? You just had an inactive offseason in that regard last year and an inactive trade deadline, so you just kept kicking the can down the road. At what point are you going to stop doing that? I thought this offseason was where that would stop, hopefully, and Cronin could prove that he could find some value for a vet piece or two on this roster and kind of move forward with the young core in a way that made sense. I think this is the offseason for him to do that. I don't really understand giving him extension before he does that, because I thought this was going to be a good test for him. And without the team having that direction towards that young core, it still feels a little bit directionless. And if I'm an organization and my GM has a plan, I want him to actually fully commit to that direction and fully commit to that plan before I go and extend him. So, I think you could have talked me into, if he had a good offseason and really passed that test, and then they extended him in September, I wouldn't have really had much of a problem with it, all right? I don't think he's the best GM. I think he's had some serious mistakes. I also think Burt Cold meddles too much. I also think, the ownership situation is messy. That doesn't help a GM, okay? So I think the Denny trade was really good. I think the Dame trade looks fine. Getting Tamani in that trade was a huge get, okay? So he's done some nice things in the past year and a half. I think the biggest problem is kicking the can down the road with the vets, the Jeremy contract, right? So it was okay, you've done some nice things. This is the issue. You solve that issue, and you can just look at the past 2 years and be okay with it, especially if he still shows patience where he's not going to go all in just because they had a little bit of success this year. I think that offseason would actually have been a really good sign for Cronin actually committing to a direction and using some logic in regards to this roster construction. So you could have talked me into having no problem with it if he had that type of offseason, if they extended him in September. I just have a problem with it happening now.
Yeah, I totally get that. I completely agree, obviously. I just want to preface what I'm about to say by saying, if you think it was justified, I totally get the logic behind that. I understand why people are excited and think Joe has done a good job. As you guys know, Tori and I look at things a little differently than most fans. And so something that I never see brought up when it comes to these conversations about, look how well Joe's done. What about all the missed opportunities he's had by making the decision to keep and sign and trade for all these high-priced veterans? The Ayton contract, the Jeremy contract, the Anthony contract is his. If they don't have those on this roster with this rebuild, who knows how many other assets he could have accumulated on top of what he already did, and that wouldn't have affected his ability to do any of these other moves. So he could have had Denny, he could have had Tumani, and he could have also made moves to free up salary in the coming off seasons to where he could take advantage and foresee, just like we thought this would happen, foresee a salary cap situation where teams that have room to do that can take advantage of teams that need to free up space. And I feel like that is his biggest weakness so far as a GM, is his management of the salary cap. And he hasn't been able to pull the trigger on many deals. He has to then make a trade to get under the cap, and then we know how that goes usually. So for me, it's
under the tax, you mean?
Under the tax, yeah, under the tax. So,
yeah.
And this team, since he took over, even the year we cleared up $60 million in cap space or whatever, we still just re-signed our own players and we're fighting the tax all season anyway. So we've been up against the tax within a few $1 million, so we haven't been able to take advantage of using a mid-level exception for a couple years now. We haven't been able to sign a player like that using that exception and, find a player that you sign and then have trade value for, like the Washington Wizards did with Jonas Valanciunas this season, something like that, where you basically sign someone knowing you're gonna move them at some point, but you get value out of it because you used an asset. And things like that, things like trade exceptions, things like whatever, just that kind of stuff, making unbalanced trades. We haven't been able to take advantage of the trades now. If you're under the tax by a certain amount, you can do severely more unbalanced trades than you could have in the previous CBA, and we can't even do that because we're so close to the cap. It's kind of negligible how much money we can bring back in a trade. So to me, he could have done all the things people praise him for, and also put us more of in a situation. We're not going to be OKC, but you could be like the Pelicans or someone like that who have continued to add assets while they're rebuilding to a point where they have all these draft picks, and now they didn't use them well. And who's to know if a GM would or make the right picks with them or whatever. But the whole point is you could have been accumulating assets and assets and assets on top of every move you made could have still happened. And I'll go back to this. Yes, you got Denny and Tumani, but you traded a top 75 player to get those guys. So it's not like you just got them out of nowhere. You had to trade the franchise player in order to get the assets to accumulate those guys. So it's not necessarily that he got Denny and Tumani for me. It's that, like you should have come out with like a Denny level and a Tumani level player out of a Dame trade. Like should be the bare minimum we get out of a Dame trade. So
people were scoffing at Tyler Herro and he was an all-star this year. Right. You know what I mean? Like
so like, yes, I completely agree. The Denny trade was good. The Dame trade I still feel like you have to see what ends up happening with some of the picks and things like that. But, if you want to say that was good, fine. I can see your point of view on that. But what I can't get behind is he's done nothing outside of that and the reciprocal trades of that to build up this roster and to put the cap situation in a favorable position for this roster. And so that's why I struggle with, like, how creative is he? How is he going to make this next step? Even Cronin himself is on record saying anyone can tear it down. Anyone can kind of build it back up to this point. The hard part is getting from this point to the next point, and I don't have any faith that he knows how to do that.
Yeah, I got to run, so I just want to put a bow on what you said. I think that pretty much can be boiled down to mishandling the vets, like valuing DeAndre Ayton, Jeremy Grant's contract, right? Not being able to get much out of the Hart trade because you drafted Chris Murray. Even at the start of his tenure, not getting anything back for Norman Powell. His mishandling of the vets on the roster and his struggles selling them for asset value, number one, and then also, if you sell them in the right trades and get assets back, you can also put yourself in a better position moving forward. That's the part that he's really, really struggled with, and that's the part that I thought this offseason was a perfect litmus test for him to do. It still is, but it's like not really a test if you already got extended. So that's why I would have waited on an extension. But we'll see what he can do this offseason. I think either he's going to kind of maybe take steps towards earning that extension, or it's going to be like, why the hell did we extend this guy? He still has Jeremy Grant on the roster, still has Anthony Simons on the roster, and is still completely directionless. And it seems like this organization is just happy with trying to be an 8 seed next year. And I think you're going to see the Blazers' priorities this offseason, so I'm really looking forward to it. But we'll talk about it more on the postgame show tomorrow. Is there anything else, Eric?
Thanks, everyone, for watching. Tori, have a good night. Everyone out there, have a good night. Good to talk to you.
Yep, good to see you. Chat, have a good rest of your night. Thank you for tuning in on the second channel. We'll be live tomorrow night after the Blazers take on the Jazz. We'll see if they can out-tank the Jazz. Probably not. We might be talking about a win, and we might be talking about passing the freaking Phoenix Suns, which is insane. So we'll see what happens. Looking forward to it. Have a good rest of your guys' night. Until next time, as always, peace out. Go Blazers!